My name is Haven Reynolds. I'd just spent 6 months pulling people out of 50-foot waves in the Bering Sea as a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. I dragged my sea bag off the last flight into Spokane at 11:07 p.m. on Christmas Eve, rented the only SUV left, and drove the 40 minutes through heavy snow back to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. The porch light was on. The front door cracked open before I even killed the engine. Music, laughter, and the glow of a 10-foot Christmas tree spilled out into the freezing night. I stepped inside, still wearing my winter flight suit boots dripping on the hardwood I'd paid for myself 8 years ago. Dad and my little sister were standing dead center under the tree, champagne flutes in hand, grinning like they'd rehearsed this moment for weeks. Dad spoke first, voice loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Welcome home, sweetheart. You're officially homeless now." Ivy raised her glass eyes, sparkling brighter than the ornaments. "Sold it last week, sis. Merry freaking Christmas." The room went dead silent. Relatives, Dad's buddies, Ivy's little influencer clique, all staring at me like I was the punchline. I let the sea bag hit the floor with a heavy thud, brushed snow off my shoulders, and smiled. Slow. Real slow. "The house you two just sold," I said, voice calm enough to cut glass, "actually belongs to—" I stopped right there. If you've ever been stabbed in the back by your own family on the very night that was supposed to be the warmest of the year, leave your story in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and who knows, the next story might end up being yours. The wind in Kodiak that night hit -40 with the wind chill. The kind that freezes your eyelashes together if you blink too slow. I'd just come off a 12-hour night launch, still had salt crust on my dry suit when I finally stumbled back to the barracks, peeled off my gear, and hit FaceTime because it was the only thing that kept me human out there. Dad answered on the third ring. He was sitting on the living room couch I bought after my first deployment. Behind him, Ivy was holding up a brand new Hermes Birkin, like it was a trophy, spinning in slow motion so the camera caught every angle. "Look what arrived today," she squealed, voice pitched exactly like every influencer unboxing video I'd ever muted. 2 nights later, she was wearing knee-high Moncler boots and a Canada Goose parka I knew cost more than my monthly BAH. Dad just sat there in the background, sipping coffee, smiling the same tired smile he used every time she asked for something big when we were kids. "She's really trying to grow her channel," he said before I could even open my mouth. "These girls need to invest in their image, Haven. You wouldn't understand." I didn't argue, just stared at the screen until the call ended. A couple weeks after that, I was sitting in the hangar between Evolution's boots, propped on a toolbox, scrolling Zillow because I liked watching the equity climb on the one thing I actually owned outright. Typed in my address out of habit. The listing loaded, first result. Professional photos taken when the trees still had leaves. Freshly painted front door. Pending. Backup offers, welcome. Asking price $42,000 over what I paid with my VA loan 8 years ago. My pulse flatlined. I zoomed in on the listing agent photo, Chase Manning, Dad's old bowling league buddy who'd been getting into real estate for the last decade. I called Dad 5 times in a row. Straight to voicemail, every single one. Texted Ivy. Read. No reply. That night, I sat on the edge of my rack until lights out, replaying every conversation from the last 6 months. Every "don't worry, we're fine," every "send a little extra this month," every time he changed the subject when I asked what Ivy was actually doing for work. I opened the messaging app and scrolled up until I found Princess Lewis swimmer from my A-school class who'd gone JAG after her first tour. We hadn't talked in 2 years, but I still had her number. Sent her the Zillow link and one line: "Can a POA list a service member's primary residence without their knowledge while they're on orders?" She answered in 30 seconds. "Send me the exact address and grantor kosh grantee info. I'll pull the recorder tomorrow morning. And Haven, lock your credit. Now." I spent the next 4 hours on a satellite connection that kept dropping, screenshotting every text where Dad asked for a little help for Ivy, every Venmo transfer labeled family, every email where I'd signed the durable power of attorney before this rotation because I thought I was just making sure utilities stayed on. Princess sent the first PDF at 0500 my time. Public Index showed a home equity line of credit opened in my name, $140,000. Dad's signature as attorney-in-fact funds dispersed to an account ending in the same last four digits as Ivy's debit card. Second PDF dropped 2 hours later. Preliminary contract of sale to Alora and Rhett Caldwell, Ivy's maid of honor from high school, signed 12 days ago. No lender pre-approval. No title report attached. No VA occupancy certification. Princess's final message came in all caps: they can't close, but they're moving fast because they think no one's watching. Start documenting everything. I created a new folder on my encrypted drive labeled Property. Dropped in every file, every screenshot, every bank alert. Set a password only I would ever remember. Then I sat on the cold floor of the barracks, head stared at the bulkhead, and felt the last thread holding me to that house snap clean in half. I was done asking nicely. Princess kept the documents coming while I stood watch on the flight deck, wind screaming across the deck so hard the helo crews had to chain the birds down. Every new file she sent landed like another punch. Page 1. HELOC draw schedule showing 3 separate transfers to Ivy's account within 4 days of opening the line. Page 2. Email from Chase Manning to Dad, dated exactly 1 week after the HELOC recorded titles clean enough for cash buyer. We can close in 12 days. No lender. No problem. Page 3. Purchase agreement signed by Dad as attorney-in-fact. Purchase price, $410,000 earnest money, $85,000 marked non-refundable. Buyer names, Elora and Rhett Caldwell, Ivy's best friend since Cheer Squad, and the guy she married last summer. Princess attached a sticky note in the PDF. Zero chance this funds. No title insurance company will touch it with an open lien and missing VA occupancy cert. But they're moving fast because they think you're stuck in the Bering Sea. I forwarded everything to my commanding officer with a short request for emergency leave and a family hardship packet. Approved in 6 hours. I bought the only seats left between Kodiak and the lower 48 red-eye to Anchorage, 4-hour wait in the USO Alaska Airlines to Seattle, then the last flight of the day into Spokane. 21 hours door to door. I slept maybe 90 minutes total, kept rereading the contract on my tablet until the words burned. Landed Spokane 22:07 local Christmas Eve. Rental counter had 1 vehicle left, a silver Tacoma with studded tires. I threw my sea bag in the back, plugged Coeur d'Alene into the GPS, and hit the road. Snow started halfway across the 4th of July pass, thick and sideways. Chains required signs flashing red, but the plows were already behind. I kept it at 45 knuckles white on the wheel heater, blasting every mile marker another minute closer. The lake appeared on my right, black ice reflecting the Christmas lights from the houses along the shore. I took the Northwest Boulevard exit, turned onto my street, and felt my stomach knot tighter than it ever had on any night hoist. Every driveway on the block had reindeer or Santa inflatables glowing. My house, no. The house blazed like a showroom, every light on wreaths on both garage doors, a 12-foot tree visible through the front window, silhouettes of people moving behind the blinds. I cut the engine 2 houses down, sat in the sudden silence, and watched steam curl off the hood into the freezing air. The dashboard clock read 23:11. Music thumped from inside, baseline strong enough to rattle my windows. I pulled on my cover, grabbed the binder I'd assembled in every airport lounge between here and Alaska, and stepped out into the snow. Boots crunched loud enough to wake the dead, but nobody came to the door. They were too busy celebrating. I walked up the sidewalk I'd shoveled myself for 8 winters, stood under the porch light I'd installed after my last promotion, and stared at the wreath hanging where my American flag usually flew. Then I reached for the doorknob, turned it, and pushed. I shoved the door open with my shoulder and stepped straight into the middle of their celebration. Cinnamon candles, pine needles, and cheap red wine thick in the air. A 12-foot noble fir dominated the living room, drowning in white lights and gold ribbon. 30 people, at least cousins I barely recognized. Dad's old poker crew, Ivy's entire ring light squad, all holding plastic flutes of champagne, like they were at a wedding toast. Dad saw me first. He was planted under the tree in a light-up Rudolph sweater, one arm slung around Ivy, the other holding his glass high. He shouted over Mariah Carey like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. "Look who finally showed up." "Sorry, kiddo, but you're too late. House isn't yours anymore." Ivy spun in a sequined mini dress, hair extensions swinging, and actually clapped. "Closed escrow yesterday. Big sis cash deal. We're literally partying in your old house right now. Happy holidays." Half the room laughed like it was the best joke they'd heard all year. I stood just inside the threshold, snow melting off my cover onto the hardwood I'd refinished myself 3 years ago. My pulse was steady, the same steady I keep when I'm hanging 80 feet below a helo in 60-knot winds. Dad kept going louder, now drunk on the spotlight. "Family takes care of family haven. Ivy needed a clean slate. You were off playing hero anyway. Didn't think you'd mind." I finally spoke low enough that the music almost ate it, but every single conversation died instantly. "You sure about that, Dad?" He barked a laugh. "Thought I was broken." I pulled my phone out slow, opened the PDF Princess had sent from the county recorder, and turned the screen so the whole room could see the highlighted lien. $140,000 open HELOC you signed as my attorney, in fact. Still active. Still in first position. No title company on earth will insure a sale with an undisclosed lien and an active duty owner who never signed an occupancy waiver in person. Which means escrow can't close. Ever. The Christmas music kept playing, but nobody was dancing anymore. Elora and Rhett were parked on the leather sectional I'd bought after my last promotion. Elora's champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the coffee table. Rhett went the color of the snow outside. Rhett stood up so fast he knocked over the ottoman. "Seth, you swore the power of attorney made it legal. You said it was a private sale, no bank, no VA bullshit." Dad's glass followed Elora's to the floor. Red wine spread across my rug like blood. Ivy found her voice shrill and cracking. "This is insane. We already paid Chase the earnest money, $85,000 non-refundable." There it was. Chase Manning. Dad's bowling buddy turned real estate expert. I looked straight at her. Chase Manning, who got his license suspended twice for skipping title searches. That Chase? The one who wrote a contract with 0 lender approval and 0 VA compliance. Elora started sobbing into Rhett's shoulder. One of Dad's poker friends muttered "holy shit" and edged toward the hallway. I took another step inside, boots leaving wet prints. "So let me paint the picture. You're throwing a party in a house still titled to me. The buyers just handed $85,000 to a guy who can't close. And the bank holding my HELOC is about to discover someone tried to sell their collateral without permission." Dad opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I looked at Ivy one last time. "Hope the fresh start was worth it, little sister. Because this is the last Christmas you'll ever spend under my roof." The tree lights kept blinking bright and merciless while the room stood frozen around them. I walked out of that house without looking back, got in the Jeep, and drove straight to the resort plaza to clear my head. By 9 the next morning, I was already sitting in a corner booth at Java on Sherman, the place right on the lake, where the ice was starting to break up in big gray sheets. I had 3 full binders on the table, color-tabbed, highlighted, and flagged like evidence for a court-martial. Elora and Rhett came in looking like they hadn't slept since Christmas Eve. Elora's eyes were swollen. Rhett's jaw hadn't unclenched in 48 hours. They slid into the booth opposite me and just stared at the stacks of paper. I pushed the first binder toward them. Every page the county recorder has on file, every wire transfer, every text between Dad and Chase Manning about keeping this off the books. Every single lie. Rhett opened it with shaking hands. Elora leaned in, reading upside down, and started crying again the second she saw the earnest money wire confirmation, $85,000 non-refundable, sent December 23rd. I kept my voice flat, the same tone I use when I'm briefing a pilot on a search pattern. Idaho Statute 54-2087 says a licensee who knowingly assists in an unauthorized conveyance is personally liable. Title 55-818 says the same for anyone who breaches fiduciary duty under a power of attorney. You file today, you'll have that money back, plus statutory damages, attorney fees, and probably punitive on top. I'll sign whatever affidavit you need. I'll sit for deposition. I'll testify. All of it. Rhett looked up, eyes bloodshot. You'd really go after your own father in open court. He stopped being my father the day he decided my service made me disposable income, I said. This isn't revenge. This is cleanup. Elora wiped her face with a napkin, smearing mascara across her cheek. We already moved half our stuff in. He gave us garage door codes, told us to make it ours. I nodded once. Then you have standing for fraudulent inducement too. Keep every photo, every text, every moving receipt. It all goes in the complaint. Rhett pulled out his phone, dialed their attorney on speaker right there between the coffee cups. I spent the next 90 minutes walking the guy through the timeline page by page. By the time we stood up to leave, the lawyer was already drafting a civil complaint against Seth Reynolds, Ivy Reynolds, and Chase Manning for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and violation of Idaho real estate code. I was halfway across the parking lot when my phone lit up with Mrs. Arredondo's number. Mija, your dad's in my driveway. He's been sitting in his truck for an hour. Says the bank just served him acceleration papers, and Elora's lawyer left a voicemail threatening 6 figures in damages. He won't leave until he talks to you. I drove the 3 blocks in silence. Dad was exactly where she said, slumped behind the wheel of his Silverado, face gray envelope crumpled in his fist. Mrs. Arredondo stood on her porch in her robe and slippers, arms crossed, watching like she used to watch me when I came home late as a teenager. I walked up to the driver window. He rolled it down with shaking fingers. The envelope was soaked from melted snow. They're taking everything, he whispered. The rental on 3rd. The tools. Even the damn mower. I have to be out in 30 days. I didn't move. He tried to open the door, couldn't get the strength. I didn't know it would come to this. I thought we were helping Ivy. I thought you'd understand. I crouched so we were eye to eye. You thought wrong? Tears started rolling down his cheeks, freezing before they hit the collar of his flannel shirt. Please, Haven, tell them to back off. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll deed the rental to you. Anything. I stood up slowly. You don't have anything left I want. Not the rental. Not an apology. Nothing. He reached out like he was going to grab my sleeve again. I stepped back. Don't call me. Don't drive by. Don't send Mrs. Arredondo or anyone else with messages. You made your choice on Christmas Eve. Live with it. I turned, walked back to the Jeep and pulled away, while he stayed slumped in the driveway, snow starting to pile on the windshield he no longer had the strength to clear. I handed the new owners the garage door opener on the porch and drove straight to the county courthouse to record the reconveyance. The clerk stamped the deed at 2:17 p.m. By 2:45, the bank had already attached a lease pendants to Dad's only remaining rental property on 3rd Street. 48 hours later, his attorney filed the Chapter 7 petition in the federal courthouse on Sherman Avenue. The trustee seized the rental, the 2014 Silverado, every power tool in the garage, and the John Deere riding mower he loved more than most people. The 3:41 meeting lasted 12 minutes. Dad left with a plastic grocery bag of clothes and a discharge order that wiped out every dime except his Social Security and a beat-up Tacoma the trustee decided wasn't worth hauling away. Chase Manning's disciplinary hearing was scheduled in Boise the following month. I took 2 days of leave, drove the 5 hours south on I-84, and sat in the back row of the hearing room. The commission attorney laid out the evidence: no title search, no lender approval, no disclosure of the open HELOC, no VA compliance affidavit. Chase tried the "I was just the facilitator" defense. It lasted 4 minutes. The panel revoked his license on the spot, effective immediately. No appeal bond accepted. He walked out the side door while local news cameras rolled. I didn't smile, just turned around and drove home. Ivy's downfall came in pieces. First, the big credit card companies filed in District Court American Express for $42,000, Discover for $58,000, Capital One for $61,000. Then the private student loan servicer tacked on another $23,000. Every judgment included 23% post-judgment interest and attorney fees. Her part-time brand deals dried up the minute the first wage garnishment hit. Someone screenshot the public docket and posted it on a local influencer snark page. Within a week, her follower count dropped by half. She listed the ring light, the backdrop stand, even the fake plants on Facebook Marketplace for pennies on the dollar. I got the keys back officially on a gray Thursday in March. The house sat empty. Heat turned off, pipes winterized. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and let the silence settle. The Christmas tree was still in the corner, brown needles everywhere, ornaments shattered where someone had yanked it down in anger. I walked past it without stopping. Upstairs, Mom's curio cabinet was the only thing untouched. I opened the glass door, took the small cedar box with her wedding ring, the framed photo of the three of us at my chief pinning ceremony, and the auxiliary pin she wore every Coast Guard birthday. I slipped them into a padded pouch, closed the cabinet, and left every other possession exactly where it was. Friday morning, I met Sarah, a licensed agent Mrs. Arredondo recommended at the title company. We signed a 6-month exclusive listing at 3% commission, priced $5,000 under the last comp to guarantee multiple offers. They came in before the lockbox was even installed, 7 above, asking for all cash. I picked the cleanest one, 30-day close, no inspection, no appraisal contingency. Closing day was crisp and sunny. The buyers, a young Navy couple transferring in from San Diego, did their final walkthrough while I stood on the driveway with 3 banker's boxes at my feet, uniforms, Mom's things, and 1 shadow box with my air medal. The husband asked if I wanted to keep the flagpole in the front yard. I told him it was his now. He thanked me for my service. I nodded, handed over every key on a new ring, and signed the seller's closing statement. The moving truck never came. I hired an estate sale company to liquidate everything left inside sofa I bought after my first deployment dining table. I refinished myself every coffee mug, every throw pillow. They tagged it all, ran the sale over a weekend, and mailed me a check for $12,000 minus their fee. I endorsed it over to the Coast Guard Foundation the same day. I loaded the 3 boxes into the back seat of the new Tacoma, shut the tailgate, and pulled away from the curb. The house shrank in the mirror until the curve on Lakeshore Drive took it out of sight for good. I didn't feel empty. I felt weightless. I signed the lease on the 3rd floor walk-up the same week the judge stamped the civil protection order. 1 bedroom, exposed brick windows facing east across the lake, so the sunrise hit first thing every morning. No garage, no yard, no memories baked into the drywall. Just me and the water. The order came down after Dad parked outside the complex twice in 7 days, and Ivy created 3 new numbers to blow up my phone, with voice memos that started with "You owe us," 500-foot radius, 24-month term, criminal contempt on violation. I slid the certified copy into a black frame and hung it over the desk like a certificate I'd actually earned. Princess had a 3-day maritime counterterrorism symposium at the Coeur d'Alene Resort that June, so she dropped her sea bag on my living room floor and claimed the couch between briefings. Evenings we sat on the narrow balcony with our boots on the railing, watching the last float planes of the day skim the glass-smooth lake and vanish toward the Selkirks. One night she came back from the lobby holding a certified envelope by the corner like it might explode. Concierge signed for it. Return address is Kootenai County Detention. Dad's handwriting thinner now, ink smudged in places. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen island, and built a fire even though the apartment was already warm. Princess poured 2 glasses of Woodford without asking, slid one across the counter, and leaned against the fridge. I slit the envelope with the same dive knife I used to cut hoist cables. 5 pages of jail stationery, blue lines, pencil so hard it tore the paper in spots. First page. I know you don't want anything from me ever again, and I don't blame you. I'm facing 18 months on the fraud plea. They took the house, the tools, even Mom's china cabinet. I just need you to know I never thought it would end like this. I was trying to keep the family together after she was gone. I read exactly 10 lines, folded the pages once, walked to the fireplace and dropped them in. The edges caught, instantly curled. Black turned to fragile ash that floated up the chimney and disappeared into the night. Princess clinked her glass against mine. We drank in silence while the fire settled. The next morning, I walked into the Verizon store on Sherman Avenue, stood at the counter, and watched the rep kill my old Idaho number on the spot. New plan, new carrier, 757 area code, Virginia Beach. Far enough away that no one local would ever guess. I deleted every shared cloud album, every family group chat, every photo Ivy had ever tagged me in since high school graduation. Blocked every number I could remember, including the jail extension Dad had used. I updated my emergency contact in the DEERS system to Princess Louis Captain USCG JAG Corps. Changed the beneficiary on my SGLI while I was at it. When the final confirmation screen flashed green, I stood in the middle of the apartment and listened. Nothing. No buzz, no guilt ping, no invisible tether pulling me back to people who only wanted what I could give. Just the soft slap of lake water against the pilings 3 stories below, and the quiet hum of a life that finally answered to no one but me. For the first time since I was 17 and watched Mom's flag-draped casket disappear into the ground, nobody was waiting for me to come home and fix what they broke. And I wasn't coming. I dragged the 4-foot Fraser fir up 3 flights of stairs myself, needles shedding the whole way. I carried the little tree up the stairs myself on the 23rd, a scraggly noble fir I cut from the National Forest with a $30 permit and a handsaw. It barely cleared my shoulder, still smelled like pitch and cold air when I wrestled it into the stand by the sliding glass door. 1 strand of plain white lights, no fancy bulbs, no ribbon, no angels. Just light. Princess landed at Spokane the same afternoon, rented a Jeep, and showed up with a duffel and 2 bottles of Woodford Reserve. Ramirez, Cho, and Doc rolled in the next morning after driving straight through from Fairchild, still wearing their flight suits because they'd come off watch at 0400. 5 people, 1 couch, 2 air mattresses, and a kitchen the size of a closet. Perfect. We cooked like we were still on a cutter. Ramirez manned the grill on the balcony in -8, wind chill, flipping steaks thick enough to make a Texan jealous. Cho took over my stove and turned leftover rice, kimchi, and spam into something that smelled like home for him and comfort for the rest of us. Doc spiked the cocoa with so much peppermint schnapps we had to open the door to keep from sweating. We ate standing up, plates balanced on the counter, boots dripping on the tile, trading stories about swimmers we'd pulled out of 50-foot seas and the ones we almost didn't. Nobody mentioned last year. Nobody needed to. When the plates were empty and the fire was roaring, I pulled a small flat piece of titanium from my pocket, cut from the tail rotor of a Jayhawk that took a lightning strike off Cape Disappointment. I'd spent 3 nights in the hangar with a Dremel and a file turning it into a 5-point star, edges still raw. I climbed on the coffee table, reached up, and set it crooked on the highest branch. The white lights hit the metal and scattered tiny shards of reflection across the room like ice on water. Princess lifted her mug first. To the people who stay when it's hard. Glasses clinked. Nobody cheered. We just drank. Later, when the others were snoring in a pile of blankets and the fire had burned down to embers, I stood at the window with my hands wrapped around a fresh mug. Snow fell straight and silent, erasing footprints on the boardwalk below. The lake was a black mirror under the street lamps, the opposite shore, nothing but dark tree shapes and a few porch lights from houses that belonged to strangers now. I thought about the house on Lakeshore Drive, the one with the big bay windows and the flagpole I'd never raise again. I thought about the 10-foot tree that used to stand where my couch is now, drowning in ornaments paid for with money I sent home. I thought about the voices that used to fill these rooms and how quiet sounded better than any of them ever did. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. It doesn't guarantee truth. It doesn't even guarantee love. It just guarantees you share DNA. Everything else is a choice. And for the first time in my life, every person asleep on my floor had chosen me when choosing me cost them something: time, money, leave days, a warm bed. They crossed state lines in winter to sit on my crappy balcony and eat overcooked steak, because I asked. That was family. The star caught the firelight one last time as the logs collapsed into ash. I didn't need anything bigger. If you have ever been told that setting boundaries makes you selfish, please remember this. You are not selfish for wanting to be treated with respect. You are not selfish for saying no. And you are not selfish for wanting more for your life than constant guilt, disappointment, or the pressure to keep everyone else comfortable. Sometimes the people closest to us teach us that love means giving endlessly. They may tell us that family comes first, that forgiveness means returning to the same situation, or that protecting ourselves is a form of rejection. But loving others does not require abandoning yourself. Taking care of yourself is not the opposite of love. It is the foundation of a healthy relationship. When you know your worth, you can give without resentment. When you have boundaries, you can love without losing yourself. And when you choose peace, you begin to understand that walking away is not always a failure. Sometimes it is the first honest step toward healing. Maybe you have experienced a moment when you had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your dignity. Maybe you were misunderstood when you finally said no more. If you feel comfortable sharing, tell us your story in the comments. Someone reading your words may be living through the same struggle and need to know they are not alone. If this story gave you something to think about, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and explore more stories in the description. Your support helps us continue creating stories about family boundaries, emotional healing, and the courage to begin again. And if you stayed with Haven's story until the very end, thank you. Truly. Sometimes finding yourself again begins with one quiet decision to stop abandoning your own needs just to keep someone else happy. Protecting your peace is not selfish, it is necessary.